Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Through My Lens. I'm your host, Karen Jackson, and on Through My Lens, we talk about people, we feature people who do not let their circumstances, setbacks, and any challenges keep them from achieving what they want to achieve and what difference they want to make in this world. And so I'm excited to have my special guest today. As everyone knows that in March it is Women History Month, and I'm all about talking and featuring women who live the walk and talk the talk. And my guest today, Dr. Soma Sengupta, is one of those individuals. And so, Dr. Sengupta, I'm so glad that you are able to join me today.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Karen. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it is an honor to be sitting here with you, talking to a trailblazer, a woman advocate, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about that. So, tell the audience who you are and what type of work you do.
So my name is Soma Sengupta. I'm a neuro-oncologist at the University of Cincinnati, Gardner Neuroscience Institute Brain Tumor Center. I'm also the Associate Director of the Brain Tumor Center. I run a research program, which is both as a bench scientist and also as a clinical research scientist. And patient advocacy and bringing new therapeutic options to patients are something that I'm very passionate about.
Okay, so you just said a whole lot. And but I wanted to ask you, I know that the last time we spoke, we were talking about the importance of women and researchers in the medical field. Talk to us about where do you see that the whole industry going? Do you see more women? Do you see more young women wanting to have an impact and wanting to get involved in research?
Yes, I think that there are more women going into medicine, and I think there are not as many women going into the sciences. But the wonderful thing about medicine is that it is possible for people to do research in the scientific areas because in medicine there's a lot of science, and in fact there's a really nice interface of science and the humanities. And so this draws a career of service, does draw a lot of women. And I would certainly encourage them to consider medicine.
So if a young woman was interested, what would you tell them? What would be some things you would tell them that they need to do to better prepare themselves for a career in research?
So what I have tended to do is be very supportive of their needs and make sure that they're showcased in a way that they can apply to what they need to apply for. So for example, right now in my group, I have a young woman who originally wasn't sure what she wanted to do, but did very well at the University of Cincinnati. And she is planning to have a career in medicine. But because of the pandemic, she could not go into a laboratory to increase what her resume has, and she couldn't do a lot of things. So I hired her to be a clinical researcher. And she works in clinics. She designs trials with me. She's learned how to write scientific papers. And by the time she gets to medical school, she will be a very accomplished scientist.
Well, I'm sure if she's working with you, she certainly will be. And talk to me a little bit. I know that recently your research was recognized, or you got a patent. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So one of the projects in the group works on sort of melanoma, and we found that there's this particular drug that belongs to the class of drugs that Valium belongs to, but this one
Mm,
is more specific to the cancer, and it makes immunotherapy and radiation therapy more effective. And we found
mm.
it not only in melanoma, but we're doing research in the lab in lung cancer, and we're doing research in the lab on a brain cancer called glioblastoma. And we've also shown it actually and published in a pediatric brain cancer called medulloblastoma. So we are, because of all of these discoveries within the group, we have formed a startup company with the chemist who formulated the compound, Professor Jim Cook.
Okay.
And I actually don't really stay within the realm of the startup that much. It's more something that my partner in the laboratory, Daniel Pomerantz Crummell, who also is my spouse, he's working on that angle. I focus myself more on patient care and running the various programs.
And talk to me about the importance of why is this research and new discovery so important? I know you mentioned about, making it easier for cancer patients who are undergoing some type of radiation, but are there other benefits?
Yes, so if you think of the overall cost to the patient. And when I mean cost, I don't mean just a financial one. I mean in terms
Okay.
of side effects and things that they go through. If you can reduce the amount of radiation, if you can reduce the amount of chemotherapy, if you can decrease the dose of immunotherapy, the side effects would be a lot less. In addition,
Mm,
if you decrease the doses of these things, one hopes that the overall cost of treatment would be less. So the plan for the startup is we're applying for funding so that we can apply for an IND. We already have a patent on the application. So
okay.
we want to sort of file so that we can work with the FDA to have this drug in clinical trials in the various cancer areas.
And we know that anything that we can do to reduce the cost of medicine and healthcare is always a happy and welcome addition to whatever treatment plan you're going to be undergoing.
Absolutely. I mean, the cost in terms of, as I mentioned, the side effects and also
Mhm.
the cost in dollars, I mean, that is so significant to families. It is just an incredible sum of money that patients have to deal with, and it's something that's very close to my heart.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's what we were talking about because, you have with all the things that our economy has been dealing with, you have folks who, need this treatment but may not have the medical coverage to ensure that they get the treatment that they need to be able to live and live a full life.
Absolutely. That's absolutely.
So I wanted to,
We try to work with
I'm sorry.
families and patients within the healthcare systems to be able to buffer them in some way. But in the end, the costs become prohibitive for many.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me, what inspired you to want to pursue this career, this type of career?
So it's sort of long-standing. I grew up in a household where my father was a physician, and he was a very dedicated physician. We spent part of my formative years in Zambia, where he worked
Mhm.
in obstetrics and gynecology. And when he was in Zambia, we lived in areas that were remote, and he set up OBGYN clinics. And I was in the medical setting, and I became very, very interested in things to do with medicine and science. And initially, my foray was more into the scientific realm. And while I was doing a lot of research, I realized that there were all these questions that needed to be answered in medicine. So I completed my training in medicine, and I became very, very interested in the human brain. So my father and I always do this joke because he was interested in how life evolved and how children were born, and I was interested in what made the person tick and how their brain
Mm,
worked. And when I was in school, a very close friend of mine developed a brain cancer, and she passed away from it. And I
mm,
was very, very taken with that, and very sort of disturbed by the fact that there was little to offer her in those days. And so
mm.
that's what drew me into the field that I'm in today.
Wow, wow. So tell me, who else has been your mentors and your inspiration to continue to do the work you're doing? Because I know it's not an easy thing to do.
So I was very lucky in terms of mentorship over the years. So while I was at Cambridge, there was a World War II veteran who was a surgeon during World War II. And he was my anatomy tutor, and it was one of the subjects that I found really tough. And he had the patience to sort of go through things with me until I visualized them. And his name was Dr. Gordon Wright. He has since passed. And then other mentors include my postdoctoral advisor, Professor Carolyn Slayman, who has also passed away. She was the deputy dean of Yale Medical School, and she had a lot of pointers for me. And while I was training at Harvard, Dr. Lou Kaplan, Dr. Michael Ronthal, they sort of helped me in neurology and pediatric brain tumors. Professor Scott Pomeroy was my mentor, continues to be my mentor. And then in neuro-oncology, I would say Dr. Tracy Batchelor, Dr. David Reardon, Dr. Scott Plotkin. And in terms of women role models, Dr. Sarah Jo Grethlein, who used to be at Indiana University, she's now at Swedish, and Dr. Dawn Kleindorfer, who used to be at the University of Cincinnati and is now chair of neurology at the University of Michigan, are all people that I find to be fantastic mentors. So I've had a lot of very strong and positive role models along the way, men and women.
So what would you say to a young person? What advice would you give them in choosing a mentor?
To choose somebody that your personality is compatible with. So, in other words, not to go for who's famous or what is it, what's in there for me. Think of what you can do for the greater good, and whether the personality of the mentor meshes that of your own, because not everyone can work for everybody.
That's so true. Tell me, what would you say would be the best advice a mentor has given you?
Actually, the best advice, there have been many pieces of great information throughout the years, but I think the piece of advice that Gordon Wright gave me when I was struggling with anatomy, he said, never give up. When people
Mm,
say that you're wrong or you're not following the common path, never give up. There's always a way of understanding and doing things.
that's always a good advice, no matter what you're dealing with in life, is to not give up despite the challenges. And that's really the inspiration behind this Winning Women series, is to talk about and to encourage other women that no matter what field you're going into, no matter what career you choose, don't give up, because one thing we know for sure is that challenges will come our way, but it's how we respond to them that makes all the difference.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell me, what would you say are your top characteristics of a good leader?
I would say that I'm naturally empathic. I tend to be creative. I'm very determined. I sort of value honesty, and I value sort of a peaceful surrounding. So peacefulness rather than confrontation.
That is always good. I think none of us want to deal with conflict, although that's
No,
just a part of what we do, right?
absolutely.
Sometimes. Mhm. So tell me, if someone wanted to, a young person, what advice would you give them if they wanted to get into a leadership position, or say they're already working in a field and they want to, so to speak, raise their hand and get more involved in leadership? What would be some things that you would recommend that they
So I would first of all explore what area of leadership attracts them, whether it's something that's more pragmatic or something that's more creative, and create a decision tree as to what their preference is. The other thing is that whether they really feel that their personality is suited towards leadership. I mean, I think throughout the years I've struggled with that within myself to say whether, I really like to be behind the scenes and be creative, or whether I want to go out there and lead something. And I think in the end, I discovered that you can mesh both together because there are different kinds of leaders. The AAMC, the various medical associations have very positive leadership courses, and some of these are structured towards women in leadership. And I would strongly recommend that for women.
do? How important is education in terms of leadership? Because I'm just a firm believer that we always continue to be lifelong learners. And that's just something that we continue to do to develop our and to hone our skills and make us better leaders in our organizations and in our life in general.
So I totally agree with you, Karen. I mean, I myself am doing a part-time MBA through the University of Cincinnati, because I think that if you are going to communicate with administration,
Mhm.
and administration is the core for many hospital systems, you need to
Mhm.
understand the language that they communicate in.
Mhm.
So that's part of leadership training. In addition, I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm doing an integrated medicine fellowship at the Andrew Weil. And I believe that the brain is there for sort of learning new bits of information. And so I enjoy constantly challenging myself. So not only feeling that, oh my goodness, I'm done because I've done my MD and my PhD, I actually really enjoy the educational challenges. So while other people might enjoy other things, I like sort of a lot of things to sort of develop my mind, because there are always things where we're amiss and that we need to learn more. And some of those things don't come easily. I mean, again, I was tearing my hair out with a module of my MBA course and thinking, why am I doing this again? But I enjoy that. I enjoy the challenge of it. I think it's very important to be challenged all through life.
I totally agree. I was having a conversation with my nephew, and he just in his mind, he's 12, and in his mind he thought, well, you have your degree, so why do you keep studying? Why do you keep learning? And I'm like, you'll learn one day. You want to be at the top of your game, and you want to be able to continually to grow and learn so that you can be the best whatever profession you're in. And so the best way I know how to do that is to keep learning and not stop learning.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what would you say to you talked about conflict and trying to avoid conflict, and you talked about your sometimes maybe having challenges in school. What would you say to that young person who may be in a position and want to pursue a leadership position, but maybe is not getting, the opportunities that they feel that they deserve? What would be some things you would tell them to do to maybe increase their opportunities?
So I grew up at a time in England where I did face quite a bit of prejudice because this was way back. So what I did was I didn't let the sort of bullying and the racism get to me. It was hard at times, and I was one of the few people of color in my boarding school at the time. But I worked my way around in terms of how to negotiate those challenges so that other people would accept me as I was. And the thing is, I think that if people see who you really are, you will obtain opportunities. But at the same time, you don't want to be bulldozed over by people who are bullies, whether they're in the workplace or at school. So you need to stand up for yourself when those situations do occur.
And that's so important. Um, you mentioned about being subjected to racism. Um, I mean, we can look on our TV screens and hear some of the stories that come out in the news that it's something that we still have to address and we still have to continue to face. And when you said that, you didn't let it get to you, what are some things that you did to keep yourself mentally strong and not take it so personal?
So one of the people that I haven't mentioned so far is my maternal grandfather. One thing he taught me to do very early on was he taught me to meditate. To really, he created a love of learning in me, and he taught me how to play chess. The advantage of learning how to play chess is you understand how to strategize. You don't strike at a time where you're in your weakest position. You
Mhm.
tend to carefully structure things so that you can be in a position of power. The thing with meditation, it teaches you to take that deep breath and detach yourself from the here and now when you're being provoked. Because sometimes, and I've been guilty of this myself, where if I'm completely provoked, I might lash out. But that's actually
Mhm.
not a very good thing to do. And as people who have had little children in our lives, I mean, I'm the mother to two little girls. It's constantly a challenge with, trying to navigate and guide children and sort of also have the balance of being a friend and a mother at the same time.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think that things like that, where you learn how to really focus yourself in a way that's a bit detached, is pretty important.
And I think that's some great advice because oftentimes the only thing we can control is ourselves. So
Yes.
being able to control your mind and what you're thinking and how you're thinking about some things definitely impacts your response and your reaction and the words that you use. So I think that's some great advice. And I have to admit, I heard you mention several people that have inspired you throughout your life. And I heard you mention men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think is the value of? I know we're talking about, women who are winning, but what is the value for us as women to learn how to leverage our relationships that we have with men in our lives, our mentors, to make a difference? Because I think that's just as important.
Well, I think sort of understanding how how to break down barriers, whether it's within our own personal circumstance of where we grow up. I mean, I did not grow up in enormous wealth, or to understand, that I'm in a male-dominated world when I was growing up, and how to
Mhm.
relate to people, whether they were men or women. I think those things are very important. And we kind of need to understand how to build relationships without the sort of the barrier of uh, whether this person is this person is a colleague, whether they're a man or woman is irrelevant. As long as they're treating you with fairness and with justice, those two things are incredibly important, and that the fact that they're thinking of you as an equal and a colleague. And I've been pretty fortunate that most of the men that I've worked with in my time have not made me feel sort of inferior in any way.
Which is great.
Yeah.
So, and I think that gives you a certain level of confidence too that you may not have experienced had you had a different experience.
Absolutely. And I think growing up with a dad that was very traditional and also not exactly a pushover in many ways, you know, so
Yes, I
yeah.
can believe that.
Mm-hmm. And always being challenged by my father also helped. So if I was happy with, I don't know, an exam score and I had a near perfect score, he would never sort of pat my back and say, well done. He would say, where did that 1% go then? That was my father. And initially, when I was angry, when I was little, it would make me mad. And then I realized what he was actually saying, which was not that he wasn't pleased with the fact he's asking me, where did that 1% go? You know,
That's
so
right.
it's understanding, and that helps. That criticism helps later on in life when we come to do research and we get grant rejections time after time, to pick yourself up and write something again, to pick yourself up and write something again, and not take it personally. Because in a competition, there'll always be people who are better than you are. So,
That's
yeah,
so good.
yeah, yeah. So I think,
That is so.
yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I've never been sensitive about those kind of things because that was kind of driven out of me when I was a kid, you know. So
Absolutely.
mhm.
And I think that's great too because I had a similar experience with my dad. He, if I had all A's and B's and I had two C's, he or even a low B, he would say, now what could you do to improve
Yes.
that B? How could you get it to an A?
Hmm.
Which always gave, you the kind of like the mindset that it is doable and you can do it. What else do you need to do to try to make that happen? And
Absolutely.
leveraging your relationships, like you mentioned, I think that's critical a lot of times.
Yeah.
Great. So I can't believe we are almost out of time, but I do have a couple more questions I want to ask you, and definitely want to give you the opportunity to have the last words and say whatever you would like to say. But I wanted to ask you, I'm really at that point where we've had so many things that happened over the last year of our lives that it has me thinking, no matter what you accomplish in life, no matter what kind of successes that you achieve, what would you want to be known for at the end of the day? Would you want to be known for those achievements, or what are some of the things you would want someone to say at your funeral?
Now, I think there are a number of things that I would want to be known for. One of the things I can think of right off the bat is being a creative thinker. Okay. The pandemic has taught us how important family is, and how important friendships are. So, being a good parent, being a good friend, those are as important as any successes in life, because everything is transient. There'll always be bigger and better and ideas than what any scientist or physician comes up with. Things get superseded. But creativity, whether we think of creative thoughts, creativity in the arts or the humanities, never gets diminished with time, because if you are a creative type, you can actually touch a lot of different lives at the same time. So never to think, okay, this is my little niche and I'm going to stay in it and I'm not going to go into other things, I don't think that's a great idea. Sometimes some people think, okay, perhaps you need to be more focused. But to that, I would say being focused is all right when you have the luxury of being focused. But for those of us who are creative, we like to be able to be in lots of different spheres at once. And in my current workplace, I have the luxury of being creative.
Yes, well, you're talking my language when you say creativity, because
Mhm.
I'm all about creativity and innovation, because I think if nothing else, the pandemic has taught us that we have to always be willing to think outside the box, always be willing to pivot ourselves and readjust some things and refocus in areas, because things are going to happen, and life is going to happen to us. It's just how we respond to those things that come our way.
Absolutely.
So I would also ask you, what would be one advice? I always kind of end with this question, um, because it's always great to, in hindsight, think things differently, right? What you know better, you do better. But what is one thing that you would say to your younger self based on what you know and your experiences thus far?
So I probably would have um, told myself to do what I was doing and not worry about it. You know,
Mhm.
I think there are a lot of youngsters who go into medicine and they see, oh, this is a specialty that will pay me well, and so they go into it. And I would say, please don't do that. Go into an area that you really enjoy and you think that you can contribute in.
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that medical schools in general need to take a look at, and this pandemic has taught us that, is does the cost of medical education need to be so much?
Mhm.
And should more people who come from sort of underprivileged backgrounds be encouraged to go into the medical profession? I think they should be, because we need to have a cross section of society in medicine. And so I would tell my younger self not to look back.
Mhm. Well, I just really have enjoyed this opportunity to kind of get in your world and know about, you hear about all the wonderful research that you're doing, and it's like, wow, how do you make that happen? And so I just want to commend you for your participation and for your willingness to share your successes, your challenges, but also how you can make a difference in this world. And so, do you have any final comments or thoughts that you would like to leave our audience today?
So I want to thank you, but I want you to also be aware that whatever research or accomplishments I have is because I work as a team. And I think teamwork makes a lot possible. Things that we thought were insurmountable become easy to do in a team.
I agree. Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer of that.
Mhm.
Well, we really, really appreciate you taking your time to talk with us. You are always welcome here. So please come back. Keep us abreast of all the latest research and the impact you're making with patients that you're serving and patients in general around the world. We really appreciate your dedication and your service.
Thank you very much and have a great day, Karen.
You
Okay,
too.
bye.
Bye bye.